declaration of interest. And Madam Clerk, perhaps just for the record, we could take a roll call.
Yes, sir. We have Chair Hicks, Councillors O'Leary and Millen. Councillor Desai has sent his regrets, and Warden McQueen will be joining us shortly.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So we turn to the agenda now. Item number 3 is the proposed task force schedule and meeting topics. And Kim, I believe you'll be taking that.
I will. So good morning, everyone. So in consultation with a number of the staff here and just based on some past experience, I put together a draft or proposed work plan for this task force to try and outline some of the information that we thought might be of interest to the committee members as we try to, get a really fulsome assessment and then eventually be able to make some recommendations. So I'll just quickly go through what's been drafted here, and if you have any questions or suggestions, those are most welcome. And there are a couple of changes even since this was drafted. So today we're going to examine the housing situation, and the Director of Housing and the Director of Planning from Grey County will really carry the bulk of that material today. We'd originally thought about having the 2 police chiefs from Hanover and Owen Sound to our next meeting. We've since found out that the crime severity index numbers come out on September 30th. And the chiefs thought that it might be most beneficial to wait until they'd had a minute to look at those numbers and include that in their presentations. So the suggestion is that we flip or exchange so that the community visits are on October 2nd and the police discussions are on October 16th, if that would be okay with people. As far as the community visits go, I thought Heather would work with the chair and the vice chair and the 2 CAOs to plan what that visit should look like and the things that they want people to see firsthand. I thought, you know your own communities best. The only question that I had about that was doing both communities on the same day, whether or not there was going to be a challenge time-wise. I don't know how much time people have to be able to put to this in a single block, or whether we need to divide those up. So we can talk about that. After that, poverty, community safety, and well-being. So many of you will be familiar with Jill Umbuck, who's chair of the Poverty Task Force, and Sarah Cowley, who's the consultant who's leading the community safety and well-being project. So we can look at what's happening with those 2 groups. Addiction and mental health issues and supports was another piece of information that we thought was important for people. I've listed a number of people who can speak to that or have knowledge of it. Alison Govier is the coordinator of the community drug and alcohol strategy. I think some of you are familiar with that. Clark McFarlane is the executive director of CMHA. Naomi Vauden is the director of mental health and addictions for Grey Bruce Health Services, and our own Kevin McNabb. So the intent, once you folks are comfortable with the list as it's been drafted, is that we would actually reach out to all of these people and see if they were willing to make a presentation and whether the timing worked for them. The social services, and I thought at that meeting we could also do the youth and senior supports. So Barb Fady from social services, Francesca Dobbin from the United Way, and Phyllis Level from the Grey Bruce Child and Family Services were potential speakers that meeting. The labor and employment issues, Savannah, our own economic development director, Gemma Mendez-Smith from the Ford County Labor Market Board, and also Y Employment. Savannah, is her name Susan from Y Employment? Or my mixing?
Susan and Linda, both would be.
Okay. Yeah, so you're working on a report right now with that.
Yeah.
And then, so that takes us to December. And then in January in the new year, we could talk about current and future development, what the opportunities and constraints are with regard to both residential, commercial, industrial lands and how that impacts on jobs and all the other things that we've talked about. And in February, transportation issues, the regional transportation, commuter shed data, active transportation, all of those pieces. So by that time, this was kind of ties in with what Stephanie Stewart would have some good information from the transit system that we're just implementing now, as well as some more community information from a couple of these other tables. So that's the plan. It does, as I've been able to draft it, I'm happy to make any additions, or I don't know, Tim or Brian, if you have other suggestions, or any of the committee members. Have I missed something that you really thought was important?
Not from my perspective, Kim, but if I do, I'll certainly send something along.
Thank you.
Kim, or can everybody hear me? I should check, so, sorry. I think the one thing, and just looking at the list, it's a great list. I think one major stakeholder in all of this when it comes to youth, addiction, employment, labor is the education side of things. And I think there should be an opportunity somehow to bring in both heads of both boards or something at some point to understand how education plays into this equation also.
Right. Well, that's, yeah, so let's think about that. And we do have 4 boards here, but the two main ones at a minimum, I think that's a good suggestion. Probably maybe a little bit later on. I wonder by the time we got to December, if they'd be in a situation where they would be willing to come and speak to us. But I will note that, Tim. Thanks for that suggestion.
Yes, the other piece, that's a very good suggestion, Tim, because the other piece of that is that I know that the Blue Water Board, just maybe 2 years ago, maybe a little longer now, commissioned some fairly extensive research in terms of demographics and numbers and trends and for their own planning. And I wonder if that data might be helpful to us. They may have some data that pertains to Hanover and Owen Sound, I would assume.
Right. Okay. Certainly. I'll reach out to those 2 directors of education and see if there's a speaker there. Anybody else? Okay. Any suggestions from anyone? Anything? Any comments?
Well, one thing I wondered, Mr. Chair, if I might, is the policing perspectives. I certainly want to hear from Chief Knoll and Chief Ambrose. But I'm thinking, because this is a task force to look at Hanover and Owen Sound and how that interrelates with the rest of the county, would it be helpful to have the detachment commander from the OPP available as well to get some perspective from the broader county as well? I don't even know who the commander is right now because they change fairly regularly, but and it may well change by then. I don't know, but I just wonder, is that something we might want to look at or hear from?
So my response to that would be probably not. However, I would probably suggest that we wait until we hear from the 2 chiefs concerned, because I know that from the Hanover perspective anyways, I think you're going to get some data that shows how Owen Sound and Hanover performs in comparison to its neighbors, in comparison to the county, and in fact, in comparison to the province. So I think you'll get that bigger perspective. You may be pleased enough with that, but perhaps I would suggest maybe we bank that. And if we're not satisfied that we have sort of a broader perspective on things, maybe we could still call in OPP.
Okay.
I've made a note of that. Anyone else?
Any other comments that I can quickly shoot down?
Well, I'm hesitant to say anything now.
No, I didn't mean to do that. I just know
I got
that.
told. Yes, you did.
Yeah. So I sit on the Police Services Board for Hanover, and I'm well aware that the data that the chiefs collect is collected provincially. And so when they present our numbers, we're always able to see how other municipalities are comparing to our experience.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I just had a comment. I don't think that's a bad idea on Brian's part, but I think after we hear from the two chiefs, that question will likely go away. That's my assumption.
We can add to this work plan both the directors of education and the OPP detachment commander as a note, and that's so it isn't lost. Did anyone have any more thoughts about the community visits? Do you think like that's got to be a 4-hour situation, does it?
Yeah, it'll be a long day because, you know, we'll presumably start in Owen Sound and then have to travel to Hanover and then have time in each of those communities. Yeah. So it'll be a full day.
I don't have any concerns with the objective there, certainly. But I have a bit of a personal conflict there. As I mentioned earlier, we have a wedding here the next day here on the farm. So I've been seconded to do stuff.
Right.
So
it's not a good day.
Probably wouldn't be able to attend, but that's okay.
So that's for October 2nd? Okay. All right. Well, that's a concern. I think, Kim, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, and with Akesh and the warden not being here either, I mean, I did check the warden's schedule, but I don't know about Akesh's, so leave that with us.
I mean, I could commit to a morning. That, you know, the morning of that day, if you wanted to split them up, as Kim mentioned earlier there, you know, if you wanted to do different communities in different days, I could commit to one or the other in the morning, but
okay.
I'm getting told
Hanover's closer to you than Owen Sound, yeah?
Oh, way closer.
Okay.
You'd have to dress up to come to Owen Sound too. You can't come like that.
No, that's right, because they're not used to working people in Owen Sound, that's for sure.
We are live.
Ouch. Okay. Moving right along, we're going to leave that with Kim, and, you know, we'll get back to you now. I would like to have everybody on the committee, on the task force, I should say, there and fully attentive and not having other things pulling them. So with that in mind, we'll be back in touch. Make sense? Are we done with this topic?
Mr. Chair, I would recommend that we just formally adopt it as amended.
Okay. So could I get a mover to do that, please? I can't see the hands, Madam Clerk.
Brian O'Leary, I'll move it.
Okay, thank you. Moved by Brian, seconded by Councillor Millen,
Brian.
I guess. Brian and Brian. So moved by O'Leary, seconded by Milne. Anyone opposed? I can't see any hands, so I'm going to say that that's carried. And that's as amended. Okay. Anne-Marie, you're on deck. We're turning to item number 4, the 10-year homelessness and housing plan.
Good morning, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
I can hear you perfectly.
Morning,
It's nice and sunny where you're at.
It is. Elmwood, sunny Elmwood.
There you go.
I put together a strategies for housing and homes plan summary, and I think that Heather is going to put that up on the screen for you. I did attach our original 10-year housing and homelessness plan because it did have a lot of the background that we used in order to form the plan. We also did an update in 2019, and that 2019 to 24, so that's the last 5 years of our plan. So basically we have 3 or 4 main areas. We're looking at creating more affordable housing, preserving the existing stock that we do have, reducing our chronic homelessness, and increasing supportive housing. As you're probably all aware, we do have a shortage of affordable housing, but we also have a shortage of the supports that are needed for people to maintain their housing. And that is mental health supports, addictions, and other social supports that might be required. So that's where we focused the last 5 years of our plan on, was looking at the creation of more units and hopefully working with community partners for a better system for supportive housing. So we did have some targets that we set, and if you'll have a look on the first page there, we wanted to complete 100 units of housing. We have right now 83 units that we have either on the way or are completed. We did 15 in Durham, and we have 80, and we have 60 right now that are being built in Owen Sound. So we're wanting to continue to look at any of the options that might be out there through our affordable housing task force, and also through this plan. This plan does identify some of the action plans that I'm going to talk about next, such as identifying surplus or vacant lands that we could use for affordable housing. We believe that with incentives and with the offer of land, we might be able to work with nonprofits and some of our private developers in order to enhance what we have. But there's also other ways of providing affordable housing, such as a rent supplement. Some people are comfortable where they are, they've got supports, but they just don't have the financial means to stay there. So by providing someone a rent supplement of $300 or $350 a month, that person can maybe stay where they are quite successfully for a long time. That seems to work a lot with our seniors. Some of our seniors are in an apartment that because of rising rental costs and rising utilities, they may be struggling to financially stay there. And so we're going to actually look at possibly putting a program together with county funds. It's a cost-effective way of people maintaining their housing. And that would be available, especially in places like Hanover, where there is a lack of housing and a lack of new development at this point for affordable housing, that we could provide that option. It's a great option for seniors that are on our list for housing. So the other thing that we have, and I didn't put a whole lot on here, is the preserving our existing stock. Of course, that's something that we're happening internally. Just wanting everyone to be aware that we are looking at that long-term capital needs of our nonprofits and our own housing, and also maintaining the property that we have. So maintaining the nonprofits. There's an end of operating agreements and end of mortgages coming up 30, 35 years ago when the province entered into agreements with for housing. They did have an end date. So we will be working with our 9 nonprofits in order to ensure that we can maintain those units. Chronic homelessness. So chronic homelessness is described as someone who has been homeless for more than 6 months in a year or multiple times in a year. And we do have people in our community in Owen Sound and in Hanover that do experience chronic homelessness. We've been working with the Canadian Mental Health Association, with the hospital, with Y Housing, Safe and Sound, and Grey and Bruce counties. And we've put together a homelessness response table. So this table will be identifying people that are experiencing chronic homelessness in our community. It could be that they are coming through the hospital or Y Housing, or even identifying at our counter. We have a by name list coordinator. It's not a great name, but that is the name that's out there. So people that are in our I guess our sector understand it. And why they say a by name list is important is because we actually know the people that are on that list. They've come to us, we've done an assessment of what their needs are, and we're working with community to supply those needs, whether it's emergency housing and then looking at some other housing to follow up, but then also hooking them up with support. So ensuring that they have supports from the hospital if it's required for an illness, and also if there is mental health concerns, that they are with CMHA. So as of October 1st in Owen Sound, there is going to be a center that has been set up. It's downtown, and it will have people, the by name list coordinator. It will have the hospital working out of there, addictions working out of there. So it'll be a one-stop place that people can go and hopefully get some assistance. Working with the Y, we then are able to provide emergency housing, and the Y has been working closely with all of our police departments and 211, ensuring that we will have 24-hour access to emergency services over the winter. Hopefully this model will be successful in Owen Sound, and as CMHA also serves Olive Grey and Bruce, we'll be able to repeat that in maybe smaller corners in Hanover, and possibly looking at the Kincardine area too. So this is our first phase of this. We've been fortunate through the Social Services Relief Fund for COVID that we've had some extra funding over the next couple of years, so that we've been able to spread out for the next couple of years in order to move forward with this initiative. So of course, after the next 2 years, we'll be looking at how to sustain that. And again, that sort of moves in with my last piece, is increasing that supportive housing. So again, we have been working with our community partners, recognizing that providing a wall, bricks and mortar, is not enough, and that a lot of people do need that support, whether it's daily, weekly, monthly, in order to maintain their housing. So that's our plan moving forward for looking at some of the more vulnerable people for our community, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So thank you, Anne-Marie. Councillors, any comments?
If I could, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Anne-Marie, can you just speak to, you talk about your community partners throughout all of this, and maybe you could just for the benefit of the committee, speak to who are those key partners and how much capacity do they really have?
Mm-hmm. So one of our main key partners would be obviously the Canadian Mental Health Association, and there is a need for outreach workers. As I mentioned, we are able to fund 2 of those outreach workers through our COVID relief funds, and it's going to be over the next couple of years, or the next year and a half anyways, and it's going to be an excellent give us an idea of what is needed, but there is a capacity issue there, and meaning that we need more affordable units and rent supplements and dollars. There is a social supportive housing review that's happening at the province over the next couple of months, and there is a gap because the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Housing, and the Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services all provide supportive housing. So we've got 3 ministries that don't necessarily at the top level all communicate. We do it at the local level, but it really does make it a more complex system than it should be. So that sometimes has an impact on capacity. So I'm hoping what will come out of this is hopefully a better streamlined system. But yes, definitely that is a capacity issue there. Same with hospital. They've got a number of people that have physical and mental health concerns, and we're unable to find places for them because they do require 24-hour care for both. So they do end up at the hospital. That again is more of a health concern. So hopefully, if we can get it streamlined as to what is happening with each ministry, then that'll help. There's also the coordination part of it, that coordinated access. Right now we've got a number of wait lists for people. So CMHA has a wait list, the hospital has a wait list, Keystone has a wait list, we have a wait list. So it'd be nice to see if there is some coordination happening at the provincial level through that. And I know that's one of the other things that they are looking at through the study.
So speaking of coordination, Anne-Marie, I wonder if there's any discussion happening in the social services web locally about more coordination. I guess what I'm thinking about is Owen Sound and Hanover being sort of these hubs. Is it time for us to start thinking about a centralized place with shared services, with shared, facility, sort of your one-stop place, where there could be the facilitation of understanding each other's silos, I suppose, a little bit better. So we know what, Bruce Gray, Child and Family Services is doing. They tend to be working with the same families that you're working with in housing, and that social services clients as well, probably Canadian Mental Health. Is there any discussion at all about, are we big enough now to start thinking about, centralized, even if, you've got an office and you're going to be here Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, at least people know that this is the place we come for that, but we also come here for other things as well.
Yeah, so that's what's happening as of October 1st. That's our homelessness response table that we've started in Owen Sound. So there is a location. So as of October 1st, there will be services from the hospital, from all different community partners. So there's actually 6 offices that can be shared by community partners, and then there will be 3 that will be permanently there. So that walk-in, that appointment response, however it's going to look like, will be there. So that person's not going to have to travel all over town to get those services. They'll be all in one spot. So that's the model that we're trying right now. Working with Ministry of Health and working with different ministries, it's very difficult to get those memorandums of understanding and confidentiality and sharing. So that's what we've been working at probably for the last year, in order to try and get some sort of system where we can start to make those referrals and make it a lot easier on the person coming in, and not having to share that story 7 times because there's 7 of us in the room, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we've been doing over the last year and a half. And so hopefully, if that model works, we can look at doing something similar in the Hanover area too. But again, it's resources and funding. So it's taken us a long time to get to this point, just to be able to provide that in Hanover or in Owen Sound. So if it is successful, we will be looking at redoing that model. But it's been a lot of work to get where we are over the past couple of years. So I'm very excited to see some of the results and some of the, data that we can bring out of that to prove that this is a good working model, and of course tweak it as we go along.
So I'm thinking towards the end, when we sort of look at making recommendations for this task force, is that one of the areas that we might be looking at in terms of making recommendations?
I would think so. By the end of it too, we should have some better data as to how many people we're serving and what are some of the results we're getting. And we are also looking at some transitional funding or transitional housing. We've applied to the province for some funding for that. So that also will be another area. So if people are coming in and they're experiencing homelessness or, struggling to maintain their housing, they can come to this table, they can have supports wrapped around them. Then we can transition them out of emergency housing into something more transitional and still provide a lot of that support services, and then eventually transition them into, housing, so that they're in a permanent housing position. So that long-term goal of getting somebody housed and working with them. The system we have right now works to a certain extent, but we do still have those people that fall through because they require that weekly or even every other day support that we haven't in the past been able to provide due to capacity. So right now, this will give us an idea of what the capacity is that we need and those funding dollars that'll be attached to it.
Okay, other councillors?
I just had I don't know whether a comment or question or the heck it is, but Anna Marie talked about rent supplements, and I'm thinking, developers seem to have, broadly speaking, a resistance to building social housing, as we'll call it, because they say there's no return on their investment or not enough to suit them. So I'm wondering if rent supplements seem to be maybe more of a practical day-to-day way to keep people in conventional housing or in housing outside the social circle, I suppose. how far are we getting into that demand for those supplements to keep people in housing, or conventional housing? You know, give me some perspective of, you know, how much of that demand are we actually meeting, or how much more is there that we could be doing to help people in that respect? That's kind of a rambling way of saying that. I don't know if you understand or not, but
I got it. So yes, so it's one tool to use. It's not going to eliminate our entire wait list, but we probably have about 25% of our wait list that it could be an option for. The other 75% are in need of housing. So they're maybe sleeping on someone's couch, or they're in a place that, you know, they've got 5 kids and 2 bedrooms. So it would work for about 25% of our list. But again, putting together, we have 70 rent supplements that we provide right now throughout Grey County, and that is funded by the province. It's successful. So I would like to put together something to bring to council, just saying this is what it would cost us to take, you know, so many people off the list for the next 10 years and provide that. And that is part of one of the Affordable Housing Task Force. That is one of the objectives that we have approved in our plan, our strategic plan for that. So that will be coming to council.
okay. Thank you. That helps a lot. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I see that our warden has joined, and for his benefit, I'll let him know that we're on item number 4 of the agenda. Anne-Marie, when we talk about housing, I mean, I'll give you an example. I live on 10th Avenue in Hanover, and you're probably well aware that there are some of your homes on 10th Avenue. And so our clients are, I guess, complicated. They come with many needs. So it's not just housing. It's, you know, it's mental health. It's drug and addiction needs, and on and on. So my street is, I can tell you, frequently visited by the police. So, you know, you might say, well, geez, we can get people into housing, but you know, our clients have a multiplicity of needs. And so it's complicated because you need to take care of those other things as well. It's not just a housing thing, because maybe I don't even want to go into housing because my mental health issues don't even allow me to, you know, to get to that point where I want to go into housing.
Right. So we do have tenant services, and we have community relations workers. So we do referrals. So we're not supportive housing, so we don't provide those supports ourselves. So we would make referrals to Canadian Mental Health Association, to the Food Bank, to Family and Children's Services, to Public Health, maybe for some family information, that sort of thing. So we do provide those services by referral. But yes, we work closely with a lot of our tenants, but we do have a lot of people that are in need, and some recognize that they need some of those services and some do not. So we do try in our buildings to bring in speakers and bring in those supports. And I can tell you that's one thing that we have been missing during COVID, is the ability for people to gather. So if we could have the health unit come in and do a seminar on, you know, healthy meals for cooking for one, or, you know, just getting people out even. But yes, it's definitely, we do, when we have areas in which there is a lot of need, we will put together a quick action plans with staff, just to try and figure out what our tenants need, and we simply ask them. We knock door to door, we do surveys, we sit in the common rooms and say, you know, how can we help this building? And that's where we find out a lot more of what's going on. But there are some people that probably do need mental health supports or addictions that are not receiving them for various reasons. And that can be difficult for neighbors, and it can be difficult for the public too.
Yeah, I guess I get concerned. You all know that I grew up in Jane Finch, and that was one wonderful social experiment, right? Where we take, you know, 1,000 families or whatever it might be with a multitude of problems and plunk them all in the same area in high density, and you know, the ghetto is what you get. So I'm concerned about that. But you know, in addressing that, I suppose what we ought to be trying to do is, from a planning perspective, if something new is going up, we want to encourage or even mandate that, you know, a certain amount is going to be affordable or attainable housing, so that we don't just say, oh, this is an available piece of land and we're going to put 50 units in there. And we know what our clients bring in terms of that multitude of needs. And so we end up with, you know, a place that the police have to particularly target just to keep the neighborhood feeling safe.
And that's why any future builds and any builds that we've done in the last 5 years are a mix. They're a mix of affordable and market, although it's not quite market, it's more attainable. And even the apartment building that we're looking at building is 43 affordable units and out of the 60. So the other will be market. So you do have to have that mix. I'm a big believer in that mix. The housing that we inherited as the county that was built by the province in the 70s and 60s and 70s and early 80s is not a mix. And I would agree with you. It is a multitude of people with a multitude of needs. And we know that that model doesn't work as well. So one of the things that we're doing looking at that is we have a few buildings that were pretty close to being 100% senior. So we've now designated them senior. So trying not to, you know, have your 20-year-old in with your 70-year-old, because that creates a lot of social issues too. So we're really looking at buildings now and what can we do in order to minimize some of those risks. But yes, I agree with you. It's a difficult one. Difficult.
For sure. Big challenge. All right. I'm aware that we have a longer agenda. Any other comments from the warden or O'Leary? If not, I'll move on to item number 5.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, it's Brian. I just had a quick question for Anne Marie.
Sure.
When we get, how many of these people or how many of these families do we get housing for that only have it for a year or two and get their feet on the ground and get out of housing and get on their own?
So our housing has changed a lot over the last 5 years. There's a lot of programs out there and there's funding available to get people working and whatnot. The people that we have that live with us are a mix. We're still around 45% seniors. So about 45% of the people that live with us are on a fixed income and are seniors. So they're staying with us, right? They're going to maintain that housing with us. They're not going anywhere. Their income's not going to change. Then we have our families. Some of our families, we are able to, this is a stepping stone for them and they do move on. I don't have exact numbers for you, but we do have that. We do have that experience. And others, this is probably financially where they're going to stay for a while, at least until their children grow up. We have a number of single parent families that live with us, and we have a number of people that whose children have various disabilities and whatnot too. So they live with us too for that reason. And then we also have a large population that are on Ontario disability. So again, their income is probably not going to change. And even if they are working part-time work doesn't allow you to get into our market now because the vacancy rates and the rental rates are so high. So the large majority of people that live with us are probably going to maintain their situation with us, or you know, some do move on to into the private market.
So I was going to ask if we should target that. Like, should we be doing more to rehabilitate these people? But it doesn't sound like it. There's more people, like they're more than likely going to be staying rather than moving. With
such a high number of seniors, yes, and such a high number of people that you know, are on disability. But a lot of the people that live with us are working part-time, even though they are on disability too. So I mean, we're helping them be the best that they can be in that way, and certainly encouraging encouraging that. And we do, again, have our community relations workers that assist people with, especially with our seniors, and if they're in need of food security or, you know, struggling with utility bills, then we do reach out and help out with that. We have very few that pay utilities, but we do have a few. But if there's something even in our community, if there's seniors or people that are on disability that are living in the private market, we do reach out to them through some of our other programs that we have too.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Just a quick comment, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, I was on mute. My apologies. Absolutely, Mr. Warden.
Okay, just yesterday the announcement came out from the Premier about talking about some rent freezes and that. Does that affect us in this part of our business? And I don't want to call it business, but part of what we provide. Is that something that, and the reason why I can sort of speak to it, because I know that came out yesterday, an announcement, but part of my MOU meeting yesterday, we talked about that also. And I was surprised it came out so quickly after our MOU meeting, but he did talk about it yesterday. So I don't know if you have any comments to that. It's pretty early. It's pretty new. So.
Yes, so it won't have an impact on any of our rent geared to income tenants because it's all based on their income. So we don't increase the rent, it is based on their income. If their income goes up, then it does. As for nonprofits that have market rent units, we're still waiting to see if nonprofits are exempt or whether it would just be social housing, community housing. So once those regulations come out, if it does, we did do a quick calculation. So what that means is when we provide a subsidy to our nonprofits, if that rent guideline freeze, what will end up happening is the county will probably end up having to subsidize that. So it's not going to be a huge amount. We did do a calculation yesterday, but for some of the larger service manager areas, it could be. So we'll wait and see what the regulations tell us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anne-Marie, I believe that you're on number 5 as well.
I am, and I did talk a lot about it
Yes.
in number 4. So the only thing that I will say is that this has been presented to the Affordable Housing Task Force. We are all of the items here we are moving forward with and have put in timelines. I believe we will be talking in our next one about establishing a land bank and really moving forward in the ability to provide affordable housing. The only way we're going to be able to do that is to provide incentives, and that will be looking at you know, anything that we can provide through a rental housing development package, and also looking at that ability to have land available for people and also rent supplements. So those are probably the 3 areas that would work to provide more affordable housing in Hanover and in Owen Sound. And that's all I'm going to say on that, because I did talk mainly about it in item 4.
Mr. Chair, can I just ask Anne-Marie one last question? Anne-Marie, for the benefit of everybody,
Sure.
Do you have a sense of any really strong differences in the situation between Hanover and Owen Sound, either with the availability of rental properties or the demand for rental? Are they both exactly the same, really?
The demand for rental is very high in Owen Sound. It's an area that has a lot of amenities. You know, people, if they need a doctor, if they, like, I mean, I know Hanover has that too, but just population wise and whatnot, the demand for housing is highest in Owen Sound than anywhere else. The demand for housing in both is for 1 bedrooms, whether it's seniors or singles. Those seem to be the 2 biggest demands in both areas. And land-wise, nonprofit-wise, there seems to be more opportunity right now in Owen Sound. We have some nonprofits that have land or the ability to build. We do not have that opportunity in Hanover. But again, one of the items that we're going to talk about later on is that we are looking to meet with all of the lower tiers to find out exactly what are their needs when it comes to housing too, whether it's attainable or affordable, and move forward with that.
Thanks.
Any other comments here? If there aren't any, then we'll move on. Anne-Marie, I believe you're going to be leaving us.
In a few minutes, yes.
Okay.
I'll be here for a bit. Thank you.
And Randy, I believe that you're on deck with item number 6, land mapping.
Yes, thank you. And I think Anne-Marie provided a perfect segue into the next item on the agenda. So as Anne-Marie indicated, one of the items, or one of the action items for developing more affordable housing is establishing a land bank, being properties available for affordable housing builds that are shovel ready. And as a starting point, the Affordable Housing Task Force asked staff to prepare maps showing lands that are already owned by the province, the county, or local municipalities to see if any publicly owned properties could be utilized for future affordable housing builds. So Carolyn Bailey, our planning technician, has prepared some maps showing publicly owned lands within settlement areas throughout Grey County. And as you can see on the screen here, as it was linked in the agenda, we just shared the maps for the Hanover-Owen Sound area. And we presented this mapping at the task force at their last meeting and discussed next steps. So I'll just scroll through here, and you can see basically the areas highlighted in the brighter blue or lighter blue is owned by the province. Darker blue is owned by Grey County, and Hanover-Owen is outlined in red. So we've, as I noted, we've shared the mapping in this agenda with showing the lands owned publicly within Hanover-Owen Sound based on our GIS mapping. Since this time, we've actually did an update to some of those maps. We were missing some properties we identified, so we have since added those to the mapping, and we'll be sharing those with municipal staff. So as Anne-Marie indicated, some of the next steps that we've talked about with the Affordable Housing Task Force are to share these maps with municipal staff, and then to meet with local municipal planners. We're actually meeting with local municipal planners in mid-October. So we're going to discuss this mapping further with staff at that time, and then work together to identify any potential properties that could work for a future affordable housing build. Next, we would explore those properties in further detail, again, with the assistance of local municipal staff. And if some properties require zoning amendments or whatever it might be, we can flag these properties for a future zoning amendment. And again, the intent is in order to get them as shovel ready as possible. And this exercise will help to determine how much land currently exists in public ownership that could be offered for free or a reduced rate through the Community Improvement Plan program for future affordable housing builds. If there are certain municipalities or settlement areas that do not have a good supply of available land, then these areas may be identified as priority areas for potentially acquiring land for future builds, especially in areas where the demand for affordable housing is high, as Anne-Marie noted, based on wait lists and other factors. So that's just a quick overview of the mapping that's attached to the agenda. As I noted, the next steps are to try to develop that land bank and to meet with local municipal staff to explore what may exist. And if it doesn't exist, then looking for opportunities to potentially acquire property as we move forward. And so that's just a bit of an overview of what our next steps are on the land bank action item in the task force agenda.
Thank you, Randy. Councillors, do we have any questions of Randy on this?
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Yes, go right ahead.
Brian here. Randy, looking at the map, you know, there's a lot of, well, it's a busy map.
It is a busy map.
A lot of stuff going on there. And certainly there's lots of vacant residential. But I'm wondering, do you plan to drill down on those a little more to say, well, yes, this is vacant residential, but from a practical standpoint, there's no way you could do anything, or we couldn't do anything with that piece of property, and try to segment them a little better as to what's practically available and what isn't?
Absolutely. And that's exactly the next steps for sure, is to go over these in further detail with local municipal staff, eliminate those properties that just they're not even a starting point. Let's not even explore them further, but there may be some that it's worth exploring further and seeing what they're zoned as, what are the surrounding land uses. So starting to get into, you know, exactly the due diligence that any any developer would look at in terms of, is this property suitable for that type of a build? And so that's exactly the next steps, is digging into these maps further. As you know, they're quite busy, and there's actually a lot of properties that are noted and shown on the maps. But like you said, Councillor Millen, are these properties really suitable for a future build? And if not, let's eliminate those and then have a true understanding of what may be available and what we then may need to acquire if we need to actually have land available and offer for future builds.
Very good. Thank you. It'll be an interesting interesting discussion to see what a planner comes up from a developer's perspective. That should be interesting.
It's always interesting, for sure.
Any others? If not, then I'm going to move on to number 7, which I believe is also you, Randy, correct?
Yes. So
the housing statistics.
That's correct. I'll just share my screen again here. So thank you again, Chair Hicks. So this is some information data that Brad Noble, our planning data analysis coordinator, has been preparing for primarily for the Affordable Housing Task Force, but as well as information that we thought was helpful for this task force as well. The first link attached to the agenda under item 7 shows various demographic data and other information in comparison to each local municipality in Grey County. And I'm not going to go through every slide in detail, but it's because there's a lot of information in these slides. I hope everyone has had a chance to go through them. There's a lot of really interesting information. Some of the slide that I have here just pulls out some of those key trends that we've, I guess, identified and flagged. And no doubt there's even further trends as you start to look at some of this data and information. And this, we're hoping, helps to paint a picture, and I think the task force identified this at the last meeting, is how does Hanover-Owen Sound compare to the rest of the municipalities in Grey County? So we were hoping that this information will help maybe provide a bit of, paint that picture. We're trying to, the end game here is to prepare a report with recommendations and action items that the task force comes up with. So a lot of this we think will provide some of that background information for that report that will help hopefully feed and provide information for this task force to come up with recommendations and action items in order to identify any needs that may come out of this data or opportunities based on the data that's shown in these presentations. So the second slide, again, it just shows some of the key trends. I'm going to try and highlight some of those trends as I go through some of these slides. Again, I'm not going to go through each of the slides because there's, recognizing that we've got a limited time to go through them all. But if there's any questions specifically towards, at the end of these, then I'm more than happy to answer those and we can look at the slides in further detail. This first slide just shows the overall population and shows, again, the breakdown of population amongst each local municipality. And of course, as you can see, the total population, and this is permanent population, by the way, and permanent households. So permanent population households, Owen Sound is the highest, twice as much as the second highest municipality, and Hanover is about middle of the pack. The next slide is age of household maintainer, and it shows it by percent of overall permanent population. And you can see that Owen Sound and Hanover have the highest percentage age of maintainer within the 15 to 34 year age range compared to other municipalities in Grey County, and second and third in the 35 to 44 year age range. They do have a lower percent of population within 55 to 74%, but then climbs back up again in the 75 or older age range. So this shows that there are younger residents residing in Owen Sound and Hanover, and people within the 45 to 74 year age range are living in higher percentages in other municipalities such as Blue Mountains, Southgate, and Georgian Bluffs.
Randy, can you just define what does it mean to be the maintainer?
Yeah, so this would be the owner of the house essentially, usually. So it's, so if it's a family, it's the parents. If it's, you know, a couple or a single parent, it's the person that typically owns or is the
person on the lease.
The quote, yeah, exactly. That's right. The next two slides just show the marital status. And for Hanover and Owen Sound, there's a higher percent of population that are single compared to other municipalities, and lower percent population that are married compared to other municipalities. Slide six, there's a higher Hanover and Owen Sound that are separated or divorced compared to other municipalities. So I'm going to go through these fairly quickly, and if there's any questions, please stop me, or we can answer them at the end. So slide 7 shows households with children at home. And for Hanover and Owen Sound, they have a lower percent of households on average that have children at home compared to other municipalities. This next slide shows, again, children at home and breaks it down into further detail and shows the age of children at home by the percentage of household population and breaks it down by age groups of children. So for Owen Sound, it's showing a higher percentage of children per household that are aged 0 to 4 years old, and Hanover is the highest in the 5 years to 9 years old and 10 years to 14-year-old. And then goes down for Owen Sound and Hanover within the 15 to 24-year age range. And again, this is children at home. The next slide shows household size for each local municipality in Grey County. Owen Sound and Hanover has the largest portion of one-person households, 37% and 34% respectively. And while Southgate has the largest portion of 5+ person households, being for 12%. Slide 10 shows housing tenure. And in terms of the percent of households that are owned versus rent, basically. And so for Owen Sound and Hanover, this has the highest portion of renters in Grey County, and therefore the lowest percent of households that are owned compared to other municipalities. Georgian Bluffs has the lowest portion of renters at 8%, and the highest portion of home ownership, which is 92%. So again, this just gives you a sense of how Hanover and Owen Sound compares to other municipalities. More people tend to rent in Hanover and Owen Sound compared to neighboring municipalities, which makes sense. Most of our apartments and facilities are obviously within Hanover and Owen Sound. This breaks it down further into household type and looks at family households and non-family households. So Hanover and Owen Sound has the lowest total family households on a percent of household basis compared to others, and therefore the highest percent of non-family households compared to other municipalities in Grey County. This provides further detail regarding family households and non-family households. And Hanover and Owen Sound has the lowest percent of one-family households, highest one-person households, and it's about even for 2 or more person households and multifamily households, with Grey Hyans and Southgate slightly higher than others in those categories. This next slide shows the age of housing period of construction. And it shows here that Owen Sound has the oldest housing stock with 40% of all homes constructed before 1961. Owen Sound and Hanover have the highest percent of housing stock between 61 and 1980. And between 2006 to 2020, Owen Sound has the lowest percent housing stock built. This next slide shows dwelling types, and for Hanover and Owen Sound, they have the lowest percent of housing stock as houses compared to others, and they have the highest apartment percent housing types in comparison. So this goes back to that previous slide of more percent renting versus owning.
Randy, if I could just real quick there ask,
absolutely,
what would be an example of other dwelling type? Like what, condo or? Yeah, so it's everything that's not a single attached house and everything that's not an apartment. So it could be attached row houses, townhomes, exactly. Okay, thank you.
No problem. And this actually breaks it down further, this slide. It shows the different types of breakdowns of the different types of houses. So within Owen Sound and Hanover, they have a lower percent of their housing types being single attached, but higher percent housing types when it comes to row housing, semis, and apartment housing types. This slide here shows, we're getting into household income here. And as you see here, there is a contrast, a stark contrast in average household income exists with the greatest income in the town of Blue Mountains at approximately 144,000, and the lowest in Owen Sound and Hanover around the 77,000 mark. In terms
Randy, if I could, like that stat, that's a terrible stat for, like, it's almost, sometimes the numbers just work against you. If you're looking at Owen Sound or Hanover as a place to go to work and look at the incomes, we're at 77 compared to Blue Mountain at 144. But then no one realizes that, you know, we also lead the league in one-person households, which reflects the income, correct?
Absolutely. There's a definitely correlation there in terms of, you know, single person households, one bedroom households or dwellings, folks renting within the communities. Yeah, so that's definitely equates to an overall average household income compared to other municipalities. But yeah, this is the data as reported, as reflected, and so yeah, this just shows that there are some differences, no doubt, between average household income when it comes to Owen Sound and Hanover and surrounding municipalities.
Randy, it would be interesting to both run a median and also, I don't know if the data is available, but the household income of people with employment hours, people that are in work.
Yeah, we can try to pull some of that out and dig into a little bit further, for sure. Okay. This next slide is education, and this often correlates with average household income as well. Blue Mountains has the highest percent of permanent population that have a university degree, with close to 35% of their permanent population, and Southgate, West Grey, and Hanover having the lowest percent population with a university degree. Owen Sound's about middle of the pack. Hanover-Owen Sound have the highest percent population that have a high school certificate or equivalent, and are about middle of the pack for college diploma. For percent population with no certificate, diploma, or degree, Hanover has the second highest, with Southgate having the highest percent population in that category. This is getting into some labor force, and so we'll get into further details in the later on in the task force meetings. But just as a quick information, Owen Sound and Hanover are about average when it comes to population participating in the workforce. Southgate has the highest percent workforce participation, with 7% of their overall population working. This slide here shows the labor force by occupation, and Hanover-Owen Sound has the highest percent population in the sale and service occupations, the lowest in management occupations. Owen Sound has the highest percent in education, government, religion, and social occupations, and a lower percentage for trades and transport. Owen Sound has the second highest percentage in health occupations, and Owen Sound and Hanover have the lowest percentage in natural resources and agriculture, which makes sense. You expect that category to be higher in our more rural agricultural municipalities.
Randy?
Yeah.
Sorry, this is Tim. A quick question on the previous slide.
Sure.
Are these associated with the place of residence rather than the place of employment, i.e. people traveling into Owen Sound to work at the hospital who are surgeons, etc., may live outside of the city limits. Of course, they have doctorate, university degrees, etc., but the people living in Owen Sound are more of the sales and service as pointed out here. So I'm just wondering, are these percentage of population by employment associated with where they live or where they work?
That's a very good question. I'll have to dig into that further just to clarify.
Okay.
I don't want to provide a guess. Yeah, in terms of, no doubt there's yeah, you're exactly correct, Tim. There's two ways that you can usually show this type of information. One is you know, the actual jobs available in those communities versus the job occupations for your permanent population or the people who reside in your community. I think it is the latter, but I'll double check and confirm that. And this slide here just shows just some commuting information just as out of interest. Hanover-Owen Sound has the lowest population that drives a car to commute to their destination, such as work or to school. And they have the highest percent when it comes to walking, being a passenger in a car, such as carpooling, or highest in Owen Sound that also uses public transit. Southgate is the highest percent population that bikes or walks to work or school, and Hanover is second in this category, and Owen Sound's third in that category. There are other slides here. I'm not going to go through those in great detail. There's slides on official languages. There's percent populations born in Ontario or outside of Ontario. I will highlight that one. So that's slide 24. It basically is showing that Hanover has the highest percent population born in Ontario, and Blue Mountains has the lowest, with Meaford having the second lowest. So this is, again, their permanent population born either within Ontario or Ontario. And in terms of visible minority status, Owen Sound has the highest percent population that are a visible minority, with Meaford being the next highest. So that's just a quick overview of some of the information that's contained in that slide deck. You know, in terms of potential questions, does any of this information resonate with your understanding of your community? You know, did any of this information surprise you? And is there some further information that this task force would be interested in seeing or trying to explore in further detail that hasn't already been highlighted yet?
Councillors?
Mr. Chair, if I could, none of this really surprises me, but I'm wondering, is it, or would it be fashionable, I'll put it that way, to identify some of the background information that is influencing some of the more stark contrasts in some of these statistics. I'm thinking specifically Southgate with the horse and buggy community. Is that something that we need to be aware, and I think it is, something that we need to be aware of so it doesn't skew our assumptions of what services and needs are out there in the community?
Absolutely, and I think as we went through some of these slides as well as staff, we were pulling out potential reasons, I guess, for why we're seeing some of those differences amongst the communities, and no doubt some of those that you just highlighted, Councillor Milne, as to why we may see some differences in some of the data and information that's in the slide. So, yeah, I think that's definitely valid, and that's something that staff can definitely work on to see if we can pull out some of the reasons why we're seeing some of these differences amongst municipalities.
I raise that because again, I'm looking at it maybe from a Southgate, and the warden will identify the same thing in Grey Highlands to an extent. The horse and buggy community, they show a number of statistics here, but on the other hand, they're probably one of the least demanding of services in our communities in a lot of respects. So I just want to be sure, and maybe there's other communities that have effects on these statistics that I'm not aware of, that I should be aware of, so that we don't skew our assumptions.
Yeah, great point.
Hey,
I would
Randy,
agree with.
go ahead.
I would agree with some of
Warden.
the comments from Brian there as well. Sorry.
That's all right. Randy, I'll get you to move on because very interesting stuff in the individual municipal profiles.
Yes, so let me just share that one next here. So yeah, this is basically similar information that I just went through on the combine and showing the comparisons of municipalities. This breaks it down by each individual municipality and shows some of those key demographics and housing information on individual slides, so to speak. Again, a lot of this data comes from Environics data that they've used to forecast and project. So basically they've taken 2016 census data and have forecasted and projected forward to what it could be today in terms of 2020 information. So I'll just focus in on Hanover-Owen Sound and pull those up. So here's Hanover's current demographics as reported by Environics for 2020. So you can see the permanent population they're projecting is currently just under 8,500. They're showing, permanent households and total households, which are pretty much the same. And again, it's showing the different, some of the information that I presented in the previous slide deck are just displayed here in a graphical way and on an individual municipality basis, just to provide that detailed information for each municipality. So yeah, it shows by population by occupation, households with children at home, and as well as education levels for each community. It also shows down, so there's two slides for each municipality. One is the demographic slide, one is a housing slide. So again, it gets into that maintainer age, the rental tenure. It's showing that's almost now projecting 39% are renting within Hanover. It also shows the households by construction period breakdown, households by dwelling type, the household sizes, and those that are commuting as a driver as a percentage. So again, it's just a way that we wanted to display some of this information as opposed to just comparing it and having it in the slides as I presented previously. This breaks it down by each municipality. So you can kind of see it at one quick glance. If there's some pieces that are that this task force would like to see that's key, that's missing in these individual slides, we're more than happy to add those. It's very, very easy to add. Brad Noble's been using a program, it's called Power BI, and it's really a powerful program for sure.
Any thoughts, councillors? Okay, seeing none.
I was going to make a comment, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
These are really good stats, really good information. You could stay here all day and just analyze the heck out of all this stuff. And but it does show an interesting correlation to a lot of different things. So I just thanks, Randy, for bringing this forward.
Yeah, no problem. And thanks for Brad for preparing it for sure. And yeah, so I agree. We could probably go through a lot of these and just dive into almost each statistic and each slide in great detail and trying to figure out what's happening. It's going back to what Councillor Mill was indicating. What are some of the reasons why we're seeing it this way? So for now, we just thought we would present the information, and that's maybe as we go forward with each individual theme, we can start digging into this information in further detail.
One thing, Randy, I wondered, Mr. Chair, sorry to interrupt, but one thing, Randy, I wonder if it would be helpful, particularly in the housing slide, would be the concept of what is considered affordable housing. Yep. Because that's going to differ according to all kinds of things in each different community. Because you know, what's affordable in Hanover well, and I'm sure it is different than what's affordable in Owen Sound.
Yes.
So that would be an interesting stat to see in these slides.
Yeah. Great
I think that question has been asked before. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Randy. What I believe I heard the answer was that it's different, perhaps in different communities, because it's a percentage of income, right?
Correct.
Correct. Yeah. So it's generally 30% of income. If you're spending more than 30%, then it's not considered affordable housing. So yeah, it's basically based on 30% of the income. So yeah, that's something that we can definitely try and pull out. It goes back to that overall average household income statistic, and as you know, with the average household income being lower in Owen Sound and Hanover, then what that likely means is that residents, there's a greater need then for maybe more affordable housing in those two communities.
Thank you, Randy. Perhaps I can get you to move on to the housing information.
Okay. So that's the next one.
While Randy's doing that, if I could, Mr. Chair, one thing I know, those are pretty high concentrations of renters within those household groups. I wonder if there's any information about the concentration of owners with rental properties. Like if you've got, I don't know, in the one case, there's probably close to 2,000 individual rental units. I'd have to go back and look at the slide. Mm-hmm. Those rental units are owned by how many different companies or people? When you think about wanting to do outreach to that community or get information about that community, are you dealing with a large number of unique individuals, or is it, is there something more similar to that group, and would one kind of outreach work better than another?
Yeah. We could probably pull that information out using some of the assessment information, and just terms of we can pull out what rental properties exist, and then who owns those buildings and properties, and see who like you said, Kim, is it primarily a few owners, or are we dealing with a lot of different owners that we need to outreach to if we want to connect with that community?
It would also be interesting to see if there's a gap between what we understand as rental units and the number of people who are renters of something.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay. So this, some of this information was presented at the last Affordable Housing Task Force. So I apologize for those that sit on both task force. But Brad was able to pull in some other data from that the Affordable Housing Task Force had requested, such as comparison data with Simcoe County, and to try to assess what is happening in each of the local municipality based on existing data sets that were available to us. Most of the data in this is from StatsCan and Environics. We're getting into some building permit data as well, and some data and information from the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation. So the first three slides, slides 2, 3, and 4, just provide an average market rent. And this particular slide does a comparison of Grey County in Ontario. And the trend is basically that the rent is increasing. For comparison purposes, the province, the provincial rents, the Bruce County rents, and Simcoe rents, all the rents are increasing basically across the board is the trend. And if we had data past 2017, we know that this trend has continued just based on the current rental rates and the demand and the current vacancy rates. The rental rates are just continuing to increase. So again, these three slides just show the differences between Grey County and Bruce County in this case, and then Grey County and Simcoe County. This next slide shows the average two-bedroom rent for some municipalities in Grey County and some nearby municipalities where the data was available. So you can see Owen Sound is in there. Unfortunately, we don't have data through CMHC for Hanover, but we do have some Owen Sound information. We do have West Grey information, so we may be able to pull some comparisons with Hanover's neighbor directly to the east. Slide 6 is showing the Grey County rental vacancy rates from 2013 to 2017. And again, if we had data information that's beyond that 2017, we would definitely see that the vacancy rates are quite low. Healthy vacancy rates are typically 3 to 4% you'd like to see in your communities. And most communities that we have data information for are below that vacancy rate, that healthy vacancy rate. These next slides, just 7 and 8, shows the average and median dwelling value from 2013 to 2017 and compares Bruce County and Simcoe County. Again, the trend here has been that the average and median dwelling values has continued to increase. And again, if we had data beyond 2017, it would show this trend continue to increase based on what we've seen and heard from local real estate associations. This next slide in Simcoe, you can see the average value of dwellings increasing at a much higher rate. And the reason why the Affordable Housing Task Force asked for Simcoe County comparisons is because some of the municipalities that are adjacent to Simcoe County, we may be able to pull some better insights in terms of what's happening in, say, Blue Mountains and Grey Highlands in comparison. And no doubt in Blue Mountains, for sure, as well as parts of Grey Highlands, the average and median dwelling values have risen quite high. And that's across the board in all of Grey County. Slide 9 shows housing starts by dwelling types. And predominantly it's been singles within that construction period, but we are seeing an increase in other types of dwellings being built, semis, townhouses, apartments, past 2017, which is a trend we hope will continue. Slide 10 shows dwellings under construction. This is based on CMHC data for the first quarter in 2020. And again, only certain municipalities we have information for, but you can see in Meaford and Owen Sound, there are more multiple dwelling units being constructed versus single dwelling units. And that's an excellent stat to see. This is pulling at some residential building permit information issued in 2018 and 2019 for each local municipality. And as you can see, Blue Mountains has the highest number of residential building permits in both 2018 and 2019, with Meaford being second highest in 2018 and Owen Sound the second highest in 2019. You can also see the trend of more multi-unit residential dwellings, as I've noted before, being built. Things like apartment condos and row houses showing up in this data, especially in 2019. So you can see the purple color, the burgundy color, wine color I'll call it, is the singles. And as you can see, the other colors are starting to show up in 2019 and even in 2018 as well. And the other colors being the other housing types beyond single detached, which is, again, excellent to see. We also have some slides in the slide deck that talk about core housing need. And this is based on a definition by the CMHC. Core housing need is housing that falls below at least one of the adequacy, affordability, or suitability standards. And it would have to spend 30% or more of its total before tax income to pay for things like median rent or alternative local housing that meets those three standards. So, we provided some information that we are able to get through CMHC. And again, it's only for certain municipalities within Grey County, but it just provides a bit more of an indication of where that core housing need is in some of our communities. And we provided, because we have access to it, a lot of detail around Owen Sound in terms of what we're seeing in terms of core housing need. Again, I'm not going to go through these in great detail, respecting that we're almost running out of time if we're not already there. But what I will do is just jump to this slide, which basically speaks to some of the insights or the takeaways of all those slides for the Owen Sound stats. And it shows that the key group of interest in core housing needs includes over 600 female one-person households, half of which are seniors or 65 plus. So Grey County housing construction has been historically dominated by those single attached dwellings. However, as I noted, those recent stats are changing, and we're seeing more construction in Owen Sound and other municipalities looking at more multiple dwelling types. So we're hoping that some of the need that's identified by CMHC is hopefully going to be addressed through some of those builds where permits have been recently issued and hopefully are being constructed as we speak. So I just want to point that particular out. And I'll just jump to slide 30 as well. Anne-Marie kind of already spoke to this in terms of the housing wait list for our Grey County housing. And as you can see, Owen Sound has the greatest need, and Hanover's the second greatest need amongst the communities. These numbers are slightly skewed in that what I understand, multiple people may put their names in multiple communities, but it still paints a picture or presents a picture that from an overall housing wait list, Owen Sound and Hanover has the highest needs at this stage. And you can see that it's mostly for singles in Owen Sounds. So this correlates with that core housing need data, as I mentioned. But there also is, you can see, a need for family and senior housing as well. Sorry, that's a quick run through. There's a lot of data and information there. And like I said, I hope everyone's had a chance to go through that. And I'm happy to take any questions with any of that information.
Thank you very much, Randy. I really like the idea of the takeaway section because great information, a lot of information, and I'm a little bit concerned that we might enter into paralysis by analysis, and the intention of the task force here is that we are going to try to distill the breadth of information that we're going to be receiving and coming up with some, using that as the basis for some recommendations. So I want to also keep that recommendation piece very much in mind. Councillors, any other comments here? We are running very tight on time and we still have the official plan stuff to go through. But if you have questions now on number 7, I'd be happy to entertain those. Okay, Randy, it looks like you've got permission to proceed to number 8.
Okay, I'll be very quick with these next 3 items. So
thank you.
We just wanted to highlight that, as it relates to housing and trying to encourage more affordable housing, a mix of housing types, there's a number of programs and incentives that council has already approved or accepted or underway. And one of those is, of course, Recolor Grey, being the new county official plan that was approved by the province last year. And throughout that public engagement process for Recolor Grey, we heard time and time again the need for more affordable and attainable housing, including the need for more rental housing. And a lot of the policies that you'll see in sections 4.1 and 4.2 speak to that need and speak to how through policy we support that mixed housing types. We support the creation of more affordable housing and looking at incentive programs and other things that would help to encourage that type of housing. So it was more or less just a refresher, just to say, hey, there's a lot of good stuff that's already been approved by council or underway that's trying to support and encourage more housing and more affordable housing. And we just wanted to put these on the agenda as a bit of a refresher and to highlight those pieces.
That's excellent, thank you. And you're right, I'm looking here at 4.1 and 4.2, particularly 4.2, talking about the secondary units and the garden suites and the tiny homes and seniors housing. It's all there.
Yeah, and that's where we're working with municipalities now as they do their official plan updates to incorporate some of the policies as well. And yeah, so it's been a great working relationship with the county and local municipalities to incorporate these policies, to look at changes to their zoning bylaws, to remove things like minimum square footages and other things like that, to really try to encourage more affordable housing in our communities.
Okay.
So there's no,
I think you can keep moving on.
okay, so there's no further questions. There's just highlight again the Community Improvement Plan program. So
right.
Task force members are aware, Council endorsed the CIP program in 2019, and it's designed to provide incentives for certain types of development that County Council would like to see happen throughout the county. Things like increasing the supply of affordable and attainable housing, increasing value-added agricultural uses, promoting development and redevelopment and conversions within brownfield, vacant, and grayfield properties, supporting downtown improvements, and supporting adaptive reuse of commercial, industrial, and institutional buildings. And the types of incentives include things like grant funding, permit application fee exemptions, development charge exemptions, tax increment equivalent grants, and donation of surplus land. So again, this ties back to why we're looking at that land bank and establishing that. Through the CIP program, we can then offer up pieces of land for free or reduced rate in order to encourage more affordable housing and rental housing builds. So this is something that it ties all in with the various programs and initiatives. This has been a county economic development and planning staff partnership, and we're working with the municipalities to adopt these local municipal CIPs so that they align with the CIP program. And I'm happy to say that most municipalities have either adopted their CIP or in the process of adopting their CIPs or just starting their process. And so that's very exciting news that we're underway with that. So yeah, happy to take any questions if there are any.
Just a quick comment, Mr. Warden, or Mr. Deputy Warden.
Yes, go right ahead.
Just, I was speaking with Kim the other day about going out to all the local municipalities just with a sort of the last quarter of 2020 with regards to updates and stuff. I'm looking at, these are one of those to drive home items that maybe if we were to do that, you know, talk more specific, if we were to go each to council to those and talk about the plan and what we're trying to do and drive home those particular parts, especially around, you know, affordable and attainable housing and all that part. And I don't want to take away from our meeting here, but just in the sense of, you know, so we're all on that same page of those, what's happening, just so it gets down to those local councilors as well. And just a thought, I don't want to take from the meeting here, but just a thought that I know Kim and I were talking about that the other day. And you know, it's just like to drive that message home and how we can all work together here on all those items.
No, it's a good and relevant thought, Mr. Warden. I think that there's a lot going on right now. Sorry, you can hear me. I think there's a lot going on.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff
going on right now. And certainly, I think a visit to each of the councils would help to inform people about what's going on.
Absolutely. So again, I wanted just to put that little note out there. Thanks.
Councillor Milne?
I was just going to, ask Randy, do we have any sense yet of the impact of some of these things that are being put in place? Like, is any of it starting to work or provide fruition of our objectives?
Yeah. Good question. I think we're still too early to tell, I guess. We have, I think, is it 2 municipalities that have formally adopted now, Savannah? 2?
Yeah, 2, and there's several in the process. Actually, Owen Sound this morning, I was part of that conversation and for the committee meeting, so it's happening.
Yes. So I think we're still early on. There definitely is monitoring and reporting that's built right into the CIP program. So as we start seeing some of these incentives being provided through the local municipal CIPs, we're going to be reporting back on that to council to say, you know, are things working? If they're not working, then what adjustments do we need to make in order to make them work on the ground?
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, is there anything that you want to say, Randy, on the bylaws?
Just again, we put this on as information. This is something council has provided direction for the last committee of the whole meeting. We're moving forward with changes to our development charges bylaw. Again, designed to encourage more rental housing, nonprofit housing, and detached additional dwelling units. So we will be moving forward with scheduling a public meeting and bringing those forward for hopeful eventual adoption by council. And again, it's just another incentive or another way to try to encourage the types of housing that council wants to see happen.
Thank you very much. I'm going to turn to item 9. Councilors, is there, well, I'm sorry to move things so quickly. Are there any questions around, we just discussed that in September, the proposed changes to development charges and bylaws. So I'm assuming we don't have a lot of questions there. Can I move on to item 9? Is there any other business? Mr. Warden, for your benefit, we are going to look at the visits to Hanover-Owen Sound. Staff are going to, I guess, analyze a few things and schedules and whatnot and get back. We may need to juggle the schedule a bit to accommodate everyone. I would like to see everyone on the task force be able to attend that fully. I think you just get much better appreciation when you see things, you know, from the eye.
And I do want to say, I apologize for not being at the meeting right at the very beginning. We had a new business to start up here in Flusherton, and it's been sort of a very important promotional, it's been, you know, for frontline small businesses, it's very important to see new businesses starting in this climate. So there was a good show of people, and it's a business that's called Eco Refillery. So it's a green business also with regards to buying your bulk supplies and that type of thing. So anyway, I just wanted to say that, sorry, I wasn't able to be there right at the beginning, but I'm in the parking lot right across the road doing the meeting. So,
well, that's understood.
Yeah.
Understood, Mr. Warden. You're a busy man and we want you to be busy.
Thank you.
So from anybody else, is there any other business? If there isn't any, we are meeting next October 2nd, and there will be information to come. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Mr. Warden. Seconded by?
I'll second it, Mr. Warden.
Thank you.
Sure.
Councillor Mill. Are there any opposed? Seeing none, I think we're over. We're adjourning. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks,
a
everyone.
lot of information.